Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the Kennedy Institute's second virtual Getting to the Point program. I'm Caroline Angel Burke. I'm the Vice President for Education, Visitor Experience, and Collections at the Institute. While our building is closed to the public, we remain committed to civic engagement and education, and we're thrilled to welcome you live, as well as for those of you who will log on later to enjoy this program. A special thank you to our partners in the Columbia Point Joint Census Initiative. That's the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum, the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation, and the Commonwealth Museum and Massachusetts Archives. Since the fall, our organizations have been collaborating on a joint engagement initiative to support the 2020 census by amplifying the facts about the census, educating young people about its importance, and encouraging those young people to share this information with others. We're happy to jointly provide this program to share more in-depth information with the public about the importance of the census, especially in this most unusual and critical time of COVID-19. Now, I'm honored to introduce our esteemed panelists for this morning's program. Joining us, we have Jeff Beller, who's the New York Regional Director at the U.S. Census Bureau. Jeff has been working for the census since 1997 and was responsible for the 2010 census in the Dallas region. State Representative Paul Mark, who is the chair of the House Committee on Redistricting. Representative Mark has served in the House of Representatives since 2011 and represents 16 communities in Berkshire and Franklin counties, the largest geographical House district in Massachusetts. We also have with us today Vatsady Sivongxay, who's the statewide complete count coordinator for the 2020 U.S. Census at the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, or MIRA. Her background as an attorney, a facilitator, and a public policy director, as well as her experience as a refugee immigrant, collectively inform her strong commitment to democratic engagement. We're also honored to have Sebastian Zapata, who's the census liaison for the City of Boston. He joined the City of Boston in 2017 as Deputy Director of Government Relations and works with the mayor and all city departments to determine the mayor's legislative and state budget agenda. And moderating our program is Lisa Moore. She's the Assistant New York Regional Census Manager for the U.S. Census Bureau. Lisa has worked for the Census Bureau since 2009 and oversees the 2020 Partnership Engagement Program for the New York region. I'll now turn the program over to Lisa, who will moderate the conversation. Thanks, Lisa. Hi.
Hi, Carolyn. Thank you so much. This is a great opportunity, and what better to talk about getting to the point than the 2020 census. So I love the title of today's efforts. And we have some great panelists on our call today, so we're excited to literally get to the point and jump right in. So our first question that we want to have a discussion about is a basic one. Why is the census important? What is the impact on federal, state, and local government? And if Chairman Mark, if you could speak to that from the legislative, the districts, what does it mean for our community, the census?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for asking that question, and thanks to the Kennedy Institute for having this event. In light of the state, it is so much, it's always been important, but I think it takes on an extra importance that we make sure people are aware that the census is still happening and that it's time to report and why it's so important. And so in my role as redistricting, why do I care so much about the census? Because redistricting, what is redistricting to start off with? Redistricting is literally how do we redraw the lines for the state house, the state senate, the governor's council, and the U.S. House of Representatives. And when the census was first called for in the U.S. Constitution, so way back in 1787, it was one of the first things that the founding fathers of the country actually thought of and wanted to include in the Constitution right at the beginning. So Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Constitution states that the actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States and within every subsequent term of 10 years in such manner as they shall by law direct. And so what does that mean? When the drafters were framing the Constitution, they looked at Europe, and John Adams in particular from Massachusetts, they looked at what had happened in Europe, and you think about how were political boundaries drawn in the old days. And we're talking about war. wars. We're talking about bloodshed. We're talking about treaties between nations, sometimes in secret. We're talking about marriages between noble families, all kinds of crazy stuff that we didn't want to replicate here in the United States. We wanted a government based on a system of laws, on the collection of data. And so they called for this census, and since 1790, every 10 years, the census has happened. And the original intention was for the reapportionment of the congressional seats, so the seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. And so every 10 years after the census is conducted, the numbers are first sent to the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk. The clerk at this point plugs in a mathematical formula, takes all of the numbers, and the mathematical formula actually spits out which states will gain a member of Congress if necessary, which will lose, and which will stay the same. Then the numbers are also transmitted to the states. And once the states receive our population numbers, then we are tasked with the important role of how do we redraw these legislative districts. And so we look at Massachusetts, we look at the growth that we were projecting based on the numbers that had been coming in up before the crisis started. And we were looking at about 5% growth throughout Massachusetts, which as things were unfolding, we estimated that meant Massachusetts was not in a position to lose a member of Congress. We were looking at anticipation of Texas probably gaining 3 seats, Florida gaining 2, possibly, a couple of other states gaining 1 around the country, mostly down towards the south and towards the west, towards some of the warmer areas in the country. And then we were looking locally at some states that might actually lose a member of the House of Representatives. And so we were looking at New York possibly losing 1 or 2, Rhode Island potentially losing 1 and going down to a single member district. So the importance in terms of our voice in Washington and our voice in Boston just can't be underestimated. When we look at some of the numbers that we were seeing, so most of the growth in Massachusetts was concentrated in either Boston or around the Boston area. The growth estimate for Suffolk County was about 11.8%. Over 70,000 people are estimated to have moved into Boston in the last 9 years. Out where I live in the Berkshires, we were looking at the exact opposite. We were looking at a decline of about 3.7%. In Franklin County, where I also represent, a decline of about 0.5%. And then in Hampshire and Hampden counties, slow growth, under 3%. For sure. And so when we get these numbers, what it means for us on the redistricting committee is, and in the House and in the Senate and the Governor's Council, is districts out my way where the population is either growing slowly or in decline, they are going to grow. I represent 16 communities now. I might end up with 20. I might end up with 25. I really have no idea. We have to see what the numbers look like. My member of Congress, Congressman Neal, he has 87 communities right now. That could grow. Congressman McGovern, who's out in Western Massachusetts, he has over 50 communities. That number can grow. We're looking at Congressional District 1, 2, and 9 down the Cape as the regions where there is slow growth or no growth, and so the district's actually getting bigger. We estimate that a House seat in 2010, 2011 was around 41,000. The House seats have to be within 5% of each other, and the same for the Senate. We estimate those seats are probably going to grow to 45,000 on the House side, and from 160,000 or so on the Senate side to about 180,000 on the state Senate side. And so without a single person being counted in the census, a district like mine, I'm going to need to find 4,000 people. And so when you go out into Western Mass and some of the small areas, that becomes very, very difficult. And so for the last year, since statewide kickoff took place on April 1st of 2019 in Framingham, as a committee, we've gone around the state and we've had over 40 events. And Jeff has been at some of these. Other partners from the Census Bureau have been there. Secretary Galvin's office has been there. Local legislators, local members of Congress have sent delegations and representatives. And we've just been trying to get the word that this is important because this affects our very political voice in Boston and in Washington, and it affects also our voice in voting for the president because the Electoral College is based on how many members of the House and Senate does each state have. And so we want to make sure that we count every single person in the state because we don't want to be shorted. We don't want to be shortchanged on that voice. When you look at how the power is shifting throughout the country, it's shifting out of the Northeast, out of New England, and to the South and to the Southwest. And while we make efforts in terms of public policy to encourage people to come to Massachusetts and to try to grow our population, again, we want to make sure that we aren't shortchanged because we didn't take effort possible to try to get out a full and accurate count. I imagine other people on the panel are going to talk about the importance of the money and the funding that is also distributed by the census. But yeah, redistricting is extremely important, and it's a great reason to make sure that you fill out your census. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Mark. Now that's impressive. So to boil it down, to get it to that point, it is the power and the voice of the state of Massachusetts. So that's really important. And thank you for that detailed indication for why it's so important from the legislative piece of it. So that power and voice of the census. Sebastian, as the census liaison for the city of Boston, what is the funding impacts for the state and federal government depending upon the census counts?
So good morning. Thanks for having me on. Thanks CMK for putting this on. Super important that we continue the conversation. I think it's actually massive in terms of the financial implications that stem from this. So as the representative hit on already, redistricting is one important facet. The other one, I think probably more crucial for a lot of folks, at least that seems to be a little bit more tangible, is the fact of the federal funding that stems from the census. So based off of 2010, Massachusetts receives between 16 to 22 billion dollars that goes to a lot of critical programs and services that most of our populations depend on. So you're talking about Medicare, Medicaid, Section 8 housing vouchers, community development block grants. You're talking about free and reduced school lunches and programs or breakfast. So it really just boils down to, yes, the absolute monetary aspect, but I think even more so, it's about the people that get service behind these programs that are created. And as we know, I'm sure anyone that's going to talk today can sort of speak about sort of the ways that Massachusetts had to step up in spite of there being lack of federal funding, as well as municipalities having to step up to fill the gaps that have been remained because of lack of federal funding. But essentially, by filling out the census, you ensure that your community and your neighbors are getting their fair share when it comes to federal funding. That's critical for a lot of programs and services that they either depend on today or that they might depend on down the road. I think especially now, given what's happening in the pandemic and there's sort of being a shortage of work or potential income coming into folks, now more than ever, we're going to need social services. So this is just another way to ensure that our fair share of the pie is just that, our fair share.
I like that, Sebastian, what you just said, the now more than ever. It's so important to complete the census. So that's awesome and definitely warranted in today's time, especially. So thank you for that. And I just want to kind of shift a little bit of gears. So we went over the power, the voice of the state of Massachusetts, and then talking about the money. And money talks, and money serves those programs that so many of us do rely on a day-to-day basis. So that's critical for an accurate count for the state of Massachusetts and every community within Massachusetts, every city, every town, every village. It's really important. And to reach some of these communities that hard to count populations, we know that there's challenges out there to obtaining this complete and accurate count. And just turning over to Vatsady, when as the coordinator for the Massachusetts Statewide Complete Count Committee and a member and leader of MURA, what are your thoughts on the challenges and how to overcome some of these challenges in hard to count populations?
Thank you, Lisa. This is a really important discussion. So thanks to the Edward Kennedy Institute and their staff, especially Caroline and Lauren, for having us here and coordinating. It's always great to be here with Jeff and you and Representative Mark and Sebastian. My name is Vatsady Sivongxay. I work with the MURA Coalition and also help Ava as the chair of the Statewide Complete Count Committee to coordinate the implementation and strategic outreach to our historically undercounted communities in Massachusetts. Our historically undercounted communities have been a diverse group of folks, but a lot of us who have worked with our underrepresented communities know that they are mainly people of color, immigrants, young children under ages of 5, people experiencing housing instability, homelessness, people with disability, young single mothers, people of color, especially men ages 18 to about 48. And people who really mistrust the government, especially during this heightened fear of anti-immigration that is going around. So what we find historically as barriers are language barriers, living in poverty and not knowing what our future is going to look like, having to move from place to place, whether you're a mobile young adult or a person or family experiencing housing instability. all of those. And I think that especially nowadays, that's heightened, right? Especially with the mistrust in government, with the citizenship question that stirred up a lot of fears. We worked really hard to ensure that the Census Bureau will keep our information confidential for at least 72 years. And that we're going to all work together as a community with the Census Bureau to get out the count in the many different languages that serve, that our communities speak. So, those are the barriers that we've seen. And also in this particular time, just that lack of time and needing to focus on the health and well-being of our families and communities have been an extra challenge this time around. The lack of internet is a new challenge this time because of it being the first digital census. And that has affected, many people's opportunities to take part of the census. Young children are often undercounted. And one of the main reasons is because they can't take the census themselves, especially children who are under age of 5. I think they're just barely learning how to write their names in squibbles and, reading the alphabet and sounding it out. So it really depends on our families, our caregivers, our communities to reach out to families who have these challenges and to provide them an easier access to take part in the census.
Great. Yeah. And I think, the children under 5, they can't do it themselves. They need a support system to do it for them. And also many of the programs that are receiving that federal funding are helping our communities and making sure that they're counted. So you mentioned the citizenship question. Now I just wanted to circle back on that. The citizenship question is not on the 2020 census. So I want to just take that time, and I think you said it so well, Vatsady, about the confidentiality of completing the census is critical. We need the trust of the public to complete the census accurately, and also the confidence of them ensuring that we're going to obtain this confidentiality for that 72-year rule, as you mentioned. So with that, understanding we're all in this virtual environment, so we are not in the same group or the same state even at times to communicate with each other, and that's part of a challenge with the census. So with this global pandemic currently going on, we understand there's some new operational timelines. There might be some different approaches that we need to take. So Jeff, as the regional director for the Census Bureau, what is the current timeline for the operations that we're, really want to focus our audiences, everyone watching today and also in the future? What is that critical timeline we should be looking out for? And also, are you hearing anything from other partners throughout your region about what they're doing to kind of prepare for that timeline, and or any ideas we could share with those in attendance today?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you to the staff at the Edward Kennedy Institute for putting this together. And all of you on this panel are rock stars. Before I jump into the changes for the schedule, I want to thank you. And I want to highlight and celebrate the fact that as of yesterday at 3 o'clock, Massachusetts is at 55.1% self-response rate. To think that the Northeast is in the center of this pandemic and to see that type of response is truly amazing. And that's due to the work of all of you, creating that foundation for the last year and a half, 2 years, allowing others, community leaders, business leaders, faith-based leaders to join on to make it easy for them to educate their particular communities. You are the trusted voices, and because of you, we should be celebrating how great we are. Now, we still have work to do in Massachusetts, and that time will come when we'll get to do some of those things that we had planned to do in person. But today, I think we should celebrate the fact on where we're at and all the hard work that you've done. So thank you for that work. So as Lisa mentioned, we do have some operational changes related to COVID-19 and some pretty big changes. So as an example, in more rural areas where the households, their only way to receive mail is primarily via P.O. box, we don't have the ability to mail directly to P.O. boxes. So we hand deliver invitation packages in those areas. We started that process on March 15th, and on March 17th, we suspended all field operations. So we only reached maybe 10% of our workload within our region. So there's households throughout Massachusetts in those more remote areas that have yet to receive anything in the mail. So maybe they've seen a TV commercial, or maybe they've, talked to a neighbor or a relative or a friend who's told them about the census, and they've went online and done it themselves. That's awesome. And we appreciate that. And we know that once these invitations get in their hands, once we do start operations back up, that will help increase the response rate. We also had an issue with our mailing number 4. And mailing number 4, scheduled for April 8th through the 16th, was when we mail a paper questionnaire to every household that receives mail delivery that has yet to respond to the census. And we had issues too, staffing issues related to COVID-19. Some of our facilities were shut down, had to be cleaned. We've lost a lot of the staff in some of those facilities. So that was delayed, but I'm happy to announce that as of yesterday, every invitation package, every paper form was mailed out from our facilities, so that households throughout Massachusetts should receive them by the end of this week, by May 1st. Those households that have yet to fill out the census, they should receive a paper form in the mail. There's really 2 key dates I want to mention about COVID-19 and our proposed schedule. So about 2 weeks ago now, the Director and the Secretary of Commerce released a joint statement announcing a proposed operational change based upon us receiving statutory relief of the requirement of having to provide the President of the United States the apportionment counts on December 31st of 2020. We've asked for a 120-day relief from that. What that does, that allows us to really revamp our operational schedule. And there's 2 key dates I want to talk about. The first is October 31st. That would be the last day that we would allow households across the nation to self-respond to the census. Again, self-respond is going online, calling it in over one of our toll-free telephone numbers, or filling it out on paper and mailing it back. So that date is moved to October 31st. We don't want people to wait that long, because regardless of when you're filling it out, we're asking you who lived at that address as of April 1st. But that opportunity will exist. Probably the key date that partners can use if they want to promote an end date is the date we start knocking on doors. And that is currently scheduled for August 11th. That's the day in which we will be hiring people locally to work in their communities, to knock on doors, to ask those very same questions that those households could fill out online, over the phone, or on paper. So if you want a deadline for your communities, use August 11th. Now, it's amazing when so many people, as I mentioned earlier, could hit the pause button. Our partners are completely re-engineering what they're doing, from social media campaigns to text-a-thons to phone trees. It's amazing what our partners are doing. And again, I can't thank you all enough. So everyone is a trusted voice. An event like today is going to reach so many people today and in the future. So don't think, I don't want any partner to think their voice doesn't matter, even if it's reaching out to your family and friends or your coworkers or those you worship with. You are a trusted voice. Text everyone in your phone book if you haven't already, and send them the link and ask them to fill out their census. Join us May 1st through the 3rd for our social media blitz. We're trying to take over all social media by just talking about the census. And again, all of you are trusted voices. So thank you for what you've done so far. I think it's a day to celebrate, and certainly a day to plan and moving forward.
Awesome. So it is definitely a day to celebrate for Massachusetts, doing fantastic with self-response rates. And Jeff, you mentioned that paper questionnaire is going to be arriving by the May 1st, the latest. So check out your mailbox, see what's there, complete it, mail it back in. And one of our questions from the audience was, how will outreach to individuals who do not fill out the census online or mail change because of that? So from a partner's perspective, so maybe Sebastian, if you want to take a look at as a census liaison for the city, how can we encourage our community to complete the census if they haven't completed it online or by mail yet?
Yeah, so I think, as Jeff said, there are 3 options to self-respond. I would argue that the easiest, most effective and efficient ways to self-respond would be going online to my2020census.gov. Again, that's my2020census.gov, or calling in over the phone at one of the toll-free hotlines. And the awesome thing about both of those options is that you can do so in 13 different languages. Obviously, as Jeff mentioned, the third option is to respond via mail, but that's only available in English or Spanish. And in particular for Boston, we have a lot of different languages spoken outside of just those two. But in terms of moving forward, what a lot of our outreach looks like is very similar to what Jeff just said, is revamping it, trying to do a social media campaign, looking at ethnic media, where can we place ads, and really trying to push folks to do it before August 11th. Because I think we want to be very sensitive to the fact that folks might not want to respond to someone knocking on their door even before COVID-19 hit, but I think even more so now, you know, for whatever reason that might be. And in particular, Boston has a lot of immigrant communities who have always been told around knowing their rights is that you don't have to answer the door from someone from the federal government comes and knocks on it. And so you also want to be very, in particular for those folks, you want to be aware of what the realities are for them. And so, you know, previous to this happening, we've always been telling folks, know your rights. You don't have to answer the door from someone from the federal government. And then all of a sudden the messaging would have to shift to, well, someone from the Census Bureau is going to come knock on your door. You should open the door. So it's very conflicting messaging. Hence why we've always told folks the easiest way to avoid someone from the Census Bureau knocking on your door, for whatever reason that you don't want them to knock on your door, is to respond either online, over the phone, or via paper form. And so, you know, I definitely want to get Vatsady in here because she's been doing some phenomenal work just trying to coordinate statewide, and something that we've been talking about in conjunction with the statewide advocates and the statewide complete count committee is how do we just amplify economy of scale of doing media ad buys as well as doing telethons and phone trees and text banking. And she's really just been spearheading this initiative. And so I'm happy to sort of continue to talk about what Boston's doing, but it's going to be a lot of similar things just on a smaller scale as to what's happening statewide.
Great. Yeah, Vatsady. So definitely take it away and share some of those thoughts with all of us.
Thanks, Sebastian. I can't fully take all the credit. There's just so many partners across the state. You know, we have so many coalitions and nonprofits and agencies working together on the phone-a-thon and text-a-thon. And our co-leaders are, you know, the Mass Voters Table. Betsy and Beth have been working really closely with Joel and Shiliu here at MIRA to really bring on board all different types of partners, whether it's like Planned Parenthood, whether it's like an informal group called Activist Afternoons, or the ACLU, or New Bedford Complete Count Committee, or Boston Complete Count Committee, you know, Lawrence, Chelsea, we're all working together. We find that during this particular time, we actually have a really high percentage of folks picking up the phone. So much more than any other types of campaigns. And I really think it's because we are all trying to connect, right? And sending the message that we're all in this together and trying to make the best of our situation and ensuring that the next 10 years will be more secure than ever. That's a message that we're sending out, and we're doing it through the phone, through text, but also going back to old school, right? The peer-to-peer, the trusted messenger, family, friends, as Jeff and Lisa had mentioned, and then distributing flyers. So building new partnerships with groups that didn't exist before COVID-19, all of the mutual aid organizations that are happening, you know, organizations that are distributing thousands of food and supplies to families in need and those essential workers, providing like coloring pages to keep the little ones, you know, busy. That's my son. Sorry, maybe that was a triggering question, a triggering answer too. And then also working with bilingual ethnic media on their radios, working with them and letting them take the lead because they know their community much better than most of us here. And so leaning on them for better understanding of how to communicate with their particular community during this time and meeting the communities where they're at, whether it's through WhatsApp, whether it's through texting, you know, the radio stations that they listen to every single Friday, the young folks via live stream because they're all home. Well, everyone's home and, you know, everyone is on social media much more now. So shifting, again, just recapping, shifting the digital outreach to social media and other ethnic media, and then looking at the old school ways of just distributing flyers and building new partnerships.
Awesome. So I think the big takeaway I got from that update was the phone. So talking to someone outside of your home. And I think that that's really important. This is an opportunity to engage with others via phone. And if that's a great tip to share with everyone here, to connect by phone with everyone. So Chairman Mark, you said, you had mentioned that, you know, it's important to get that accurate count. Everyone in the state of Massachusetts must be counted in the state of Massachusetts. And Massachusetts has a large college student population. So we need to make certain that they're counted in the state of Massachusetts. So what would you say to a college student that might have left the state but needs to be counted in Massachusetts? And then I'll turn it over to Jeff Baylor to talk more specifically about the group quarters count.
Yeah, we worked together, Redistricting committee with the higher ed committee to make sure that we got the word from the Census Bureau out to all of the colleges and universities that the instructions I saw were that the counts are supposed to be conducted as though the students hadn't left, that you should have counted April 1st as though you were there on campus. And so we've been trying to work with the different colleges and universities to get that count accurate and to encourage them to do it the right way. The problem I've been seeing, and hopefully maybe Jeff will have some ideas. I've been trying to get a better idea from Secretary Galvin about some outreach ideas, is how we're going to get some of the off-campus residential students, how we're going to get some of them to count. And I think that particularly in the Boston area is going to be an issue, because if you left, if your college closed down and you're from another state or from another country even, and you took off and you left the Boston area before April 1st, this might not be the first thing on your mind. But the good news I'm seeing is that this is going to be an issue in every state. And so hopefully, as the word is spread by the Census Bureau, by regional complete count committees, by different state entities, that students are going to realize, well, I should count where I was supposed to be, and the colleges are going to do outreach efforts to try to help get students to do these things, because obviously a college benefits by its local host city or host community receiving the funding that it's entitled to and receiving the political voice that it's entitled to. Some of the good news is we had come up with this grant program in the legislature that we allocated $2.5 million that was going to be available through Secretary Galvin's office, and he had actually held off on releasing the money until the field operations begun. So I think that's going to be helpful that the money's still there, and the money will be able to go out and be distributed as the intensity and the ability to go door to door and reach out to communities in ways that aren't virtual starts to return. But yeah, I'd be very interested to hear other thoughts from the Census Bureau on how we should make sure this happens, right? Or from the city of Boston even too.
Yeah, definitely. And Chairman Mark, I just want to let you know that this actually came from the audience. So this is a pertinent question that's out there. People want to know. They want to make sure their off-campus and on-campus students are counted. So Jeff, if you have any thoughts on that, and then I'll turn it over to Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you. And absolutely a critical group that we have to ensure we get completely and accurately counted. So I think of college students in two ways when it comes in terms of the census: on campus. And we work directly with college administrators. We've been having calls. We are allowing them to change the way. Back in February, every group quarter, which it's college universities, dormitories are included in those, had the ability to choose which way they wanted to enumerate their population. So for all those that asked for us to drop off questionnaires and come back and pick them up at a later date, or to do enumeration in person, we've called all those colleges and universities back and are allowing them to change the way in which they count their on-campus population. So I feel confident that we're going to be able to get a complete and accurate count. We're willing to change and flex as we need to make it as easy as possible for that college or university. As you mentioned, Chairman Mark, the off-campus is really the concern. It's those students who are renting apartments, they're renting a room in someone's home. They've went home for the semester, they're finishing out the semester virtually. Their parents probably already included them on their census form back home. And that's okay. That's the first thing I want to say. It's okay if you've already been included on your parents' form. We still need you to fill out your form where you would have lived off campus at that apartment or home. So a couple of things we're doing, and our partners again are amazing. Tufts University, a group of students, put out this really cool video that they've shared with colleges and universities and we've shared region-wide with other colleges and universities to give an idea, because we found that when you get these student organizations reaching out to their fellow students virtually who are at home, that has a big draw versus, you know, hearing something from the federal government. So that's one way we're reaching. I want to throw this out there. While we hope we get a numeratum well before September comes, self-response is extended to October 31st. So when those students come back, hopefully they come back and school's on schedule to start in September, we need to reach out to those upperclassmen and find out, did you complete your form when you lived off campus the previous year? And if not, you need to do that now. Here's how you do it. But in the meantime, some other things that we've heard, we've had professors who are starting, you know, whether they choose a week, last week or this week, to open every class that they're teaching with the reminder to their students. If you lived off campus, you need to go online now. You don't need a census ID. You don't need that invitation in the mail. You go to 2020census.gov, click the respond button, and then you can immediately click the link. And I think Lisa was pointing to that. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Hit the respond button and just click the link that says you don't have your census ID. It'll ask you to key in your address, and then you can go ahead and complete your census. So we're looking for those trusted voices, such as student organizations, to get that message out now.
Great. And yeah, definitely go to 2020census.gov to respond to the census now. So Sebastian, if you had any other thoughts related to the city of Boston, which is a huge college town.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have over 20 college universities in the city of Boston, approximately 150,000 college students between our public and private institutions. And so a lot of the legwork that we were doing, you know, before the census even started, when folks would respond, is forming together a subcommittee of all the different college universities in Boston to sort of give them an explanation of what are the resources in terms of materials that are available to them, as well as what are the most efficient and effective ways that they can respond. And so again, going back to what Jeff said, there are two ways to think about it. It's the college students that live on campus, so housing that's done through the university or college itself, and then for the ones that live off campus. And so a lot of universities have made the shift after COVID-19, since they've had to close campuses, to just say, hey, we're going to do an electronic response where we just simply essentially hand in an Excel spreadsheet of every student that's housed through us. And so now we're thinking through, how do we get messaging out to the off-campus students? I've seen that there's been a push to do also including off-campus student administration record turnover. Hopefully that could be a potential option moving forward. That would be very easy for colleges and universities, I think, moving forward. But nonetheless, if that's not an option, it's really going back to all the administrators, the college presidents of certain clubs, as well as working with those that have already been identified ahead of time for the Census Bureau, and sort of liaisoning with them to say, you know, here's some ideas that we have around messaging for off-campus students. But I do think it's also going to be a multitude of strategies. It's not going to be one silver bullet. I think overall, most people can agree with that, regardless of whatever issue that it is that's not one single strategy. So whether it's peer-to-peer between college students, whether it's, you know, Mayor Walsh making some type of announcement, whether it's the Census Bureau doing an additional mailer potentially, we're just going to work through the options, whatever they may be.
Great. Such great ideas, and definitely a lot of different initiatives. I liked what you said. It's not going to be one silver bullet to cover it all. We're going to try different avenues to get that message to our students, which is so critical. And just, Jeff, if you can just briefly mention, we did have a question from the audience. So just a brief remark on how will nursing homes and assisted living facilities be impacted in the group count? So just touch on those types of group enumerations.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, nursing homes, jails, prisons, college dormitories, they're all considered military barracks. They're all part of our group quarters operation. So we are reaching out to every group quarter across the nation. And basically, for those that did not select that they wanted to go online and enter the information themselves, or that they didn't want to provide us with an administrative file, we're going back, we're recontacting them, asking them to reconsider, try to make it as easy as possible. We'll even come and pick up an administrative list if that's easy enough. But the goal here is to reduce the amount of contact, to reduce the need to send employees to a facility to have them walk around and interview each individual person.
And Jeff, for those group quarters, would it still be the reference point of April 1st if they were providing those rosters? Yes,
so for group quarters, it is still the reference point of April 1st. The question we have out yet that hasn't been decided is what do we do for those mobile food vans, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, and of course when we actually go out there and conduct our homeless count.
Perfect, great. And of course, when we have updates to that type of operational information, it will be at 2020 census.gov. My finger arrives. Can't get it. Okay. So we're going to kind of shift a little bit of gears, getting back to the census questionnaire. And there's a couple of questions that came in for the audience, and I'm going to kind of tie them together as best as I can, but I do appreciate the questions that have come in from the audience. And I'm going to look to both Vatsady and Jeff, but I'll really open it up to anyone who wants to speak on these questions for the particular questionnaire. So the first question is, what is the rationale behind the race identifier? So how is the data used for these race identifiers? And that's just the general topic that we'll discuss at this point. But then tying it into our MENA population, our Middle Eastern or North African, the question that came in is, why are they considered Middle Eastern or North African considered white for the census purposes? So just the question around Middle Eastern or North African, and then also who's considered Hispanic or Latino? How should I complete that question? So those are our three questions right now on our race and ethnicities question. So I'll turn it first to Vatsady if you want to talk briefly on that, and then I'll turn it back to Jeff for the statistical piece.
Sure, thank you. So the Census Bureau uses the race to help really identify just data on a social construct perspective, right? A social construct based on our US society, and not really the very diverse ethnic and biological and anthropological diversity within our communities. But the main message here is that you self-identify. So whether you're part of the Middle Eastern, Northern African, or Hispanic, Latino, Spanish origin, if you identify as a white person, then that's your choice to put on there. You can put multiple nationalities or ethnicity by hitting other and then filling in those spaces. You can, if you're Syrian, Moroccan, and Arab, then you can put all three, right? It's really self-identification. And it's really important to show like how you self-identify, because a lot of federal and state policy decisions and allocation of funds and also our civil rights analysis and determination really require the data, right? And so we want to show up in a way, we want to show up in the data in the way that we identify who we are. So for example, for me, on the outside, I may look Asian, but I self-identify as a Lao person. And because Laos has so many ethnicities within my national origin country of Laos, other folks may identify as Laotian, which is more inclusive than the Lao ethnic group, right? So that's like, even in our Asian culture, our Asian our background, we are very, very diverse, just like the Middle Eastern and North African communities, just like our Spanish, Latino, and Spanish communities. So again, this is just a social definition based here in the United States, and really emphasize the importance of showing up the way that you self-identify, because this is how we move our communities forward and really show the diversity here in the United States, and really be welcoming and showing folks how we are diverse, and that despite our diversity, we can still work together on a lot of these federal programs that can best serve our communities in the next 10 years, because we showed up the way that we wanted to.
I love that. We showed up the way that we wanted to for the next 10 years. And I think that that's really important to highlight. It is for the next 10 years. So Jeff, if you want to speak to the statistical piece of it and the questions and how they get proposed.
Yeah, great question. So we're required as a federal agency, we're required to follow the standards that are put in place by the Office of Budget and Management, Office of Management and Budget, excuse me, OMB. And these standards, these race categories have been in place since 1997. So we're required to follow those. Now we have a group of leaders of different communities and ethnic backgrounds work together throughout the decade to try to determine what is the best way to ask the race and ethnicity question. And because this data is important, I mean, the federal government will use this to ensure compliance with things like the Voting Rights Act, with the Civil Rights Act. So this data is extremely important. But one of the things that I think was a great change for the census in regards to race and ethnicity is now every race has the ability to write in their ethnicity. In the past, it was only if you checked other, you could write in an ethnicity. This time it's every race, you have a checkbox, and then you have an open box below it where you can write in. So we're hearing, I think in Massachusetts, the Make Portuguese Count organization that nationwide is doing some amazing things to really motivate the Portuguese community to ensure that they get counted. And I think of a real life example of how this data can change communities. Going back to 2010, there was a Bangladeshi community in New York City, and they wanted to identify themselves as Bangladeshi in the ethnicity question. So they wrote in Bangladeshi in 2010, and based upon the results, the Board of Elections had to introduce paper ballots in the Bangla language in those areas in which there was a high concentration. And even the Board of Education decided to adopt 2 Muslim holidays due to the large amount of community members. I mean, this is a way, the census is a way to celebrate the diversity of all these communities, throughout Massachusetts. And what a great way to motivate your community by using this race and ethnicity question to really identify and tell, it is self-identification, but there's a lot of great campaigns out there. Hey, if you're Portuguese, this is how we want you to fill out your questionnaire.
Right. I love seeing that. I follow it all on social media. Here's the questionnaire. This is how we should complete it for our community, so that they get that count, so they get that representation. So that's awesome. And thank you for that. We are down to a few minutes remaining of today's session, and I cannot thank you all enough for providing your great insights. We did get one last late minute question that came in regarding Puerto Rico. So Jeff, can you just in two sentences really, because we are running out of time, give us an update on Puerto Rico and our tribal lands? And I know you mentioned about that update leave operation, but just understanding why their count is a little bit lower right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Puerto Rico, we made the decision after Hurricane Maria that we would hand deliver invitation packages to every household across the island. That allows us to update our address list, at the same time ensure every housing unit, we're not dependent on the very complex mailing system, address system that they have in place. Because of COVID-19, we stopped all field operations, which means we work for about a day and a half in hand delivering those. So as soon as it's safe for the public and for our employees to get out there and hand deliver, we will. But we're just asking people right now to be patient. Don't pay attention to that map if you live in Puerto Rico, because that's not a fair fight when you're looking at trying to compare to other areas, because no one has received their invitation yet.
Great. So thank you, Jeff. So then again, thank you all the panelists for here, but I do want to just do a quick round robin to see if there's any last minute remarks that you would have for the constituents within your districts, within the state of Massachusetts, any different populations. So what are your last remarks that you want to make certain we respond today at 2020census.gov and ensure that everyone is counted? So Chairman Mark, will you lead our efforts in closing out today?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you again, everybody, for being here and for having me participate. Someone mentioned it. The numbers we get right now, we're going to be stuck with for 10 years until 2030. And $675 billion right now is allocated through the census. Hundreds of state and federal programs is allocated through the census. That number could increase significantly depending on what kind of stimulus and relief packages are made available by the federal and various state governments. So as it was, every person that doesn't fill out their census, they're estimating costs the community about $2,300 a year for the next 10 years, so $23,000 over 10 years. That number could be significantly more. We need every penny, every place in this country, every place in this state as well. So please do it, and then be counted. Stand up, have your voice heard, because political power matters, and it matters in your community as much as it does in mine and every rest. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chairman Mark. All right, Sebastian.
So I would just say to anybody that's either listening live right now or going to be watching this later on that the census is direct democracy in action. It is community empowerment in action. Essentially, by filling out the census, you're helping out yourself, your neighbor, your community to do three things. You increase the fair share that we are entitled to for federal funding. That again goes to critical programs and services that most vulnerable populations depend on. If you care about historically gerrymandered districts and how that process is going to be redone through redistricting, it starts with the census data. And if you care about congressional apportionment and the power that we get in Congress by having rock stars like Ayanna Pressley, having Congressman Neal, who wields a very big stick in Washington with the committee that he has, we could potentially bolster how many folks are in the Massachusetts delegation by filling out the census. In 2000 and 2010, we lost congressional seats. And obviously, as we know, there's a big election coming up in November, and that's going to be based off of the Electoral College. So a potential three themes and are the federal funding, representation, and redistricting. But again, more importantly, the fourth really big theme is the fact that it's the people behind all these massive impacts that stem from the census. So please, I encourage you to go to 2020census.gov. The survey should take no less than 15 minutes to fill out. It's very quick. And you only have to do it once, and it'll decide the next 10 years of all these things that we've been talking about today. It's our once-in-a-decade shot to get what we deserve.
Great, thank you. I'll turn it over to Vatsady.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for Lisa for moderating us today in this discussion, and the EMK Institute and the staff there. We're all in this together in this particular moment, and also for the 10 years going forward and beyond. So I think what is important here is that, we need to bring our communities together and help each other out. Like Sebastian said, it takes less than 15 minutes, hopefully less than 10 minutes. It's about 10 questions, depending on how many family members or folks living with you you're filling out the information for. But everyone counts. That's every adult, every child, every baby who is born by April 1st, and everyone who's living by April 1st, right? I also asked folks to get involved, especially from the comfort of your home. Reach out to me here at NERA. You can easily find my contact at neracoalition.org and reach out to help with phone banking, texting. If you just wanted a quick training on the 101s of census, a quick training on phone banking so that you can go out into your community and work with different organizations to get the importance of the census out. And just reach out just the best way that you can. Even that simple text to your friends and family is going to make a huge difference. So take a minute, take 10 minutes, take 2 hours to help out. And we would all really appreciate you being on board in whatever capacity you can. Again, thank you, and really, really love this discussion today.
Yes, thank you. This is great. And then Jeff, after your remarks, we'll turn it back over to Caroline.
All right, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, fellow panelists. You were amazing as always. It's an honor to share any stage with you, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing and the trusted voices. At a time when we're all living Groundhog's Day, day after day after day, wondering what day it is when we wake up, self-quarantining or sheltering at home, we feel powerless. This is a way to get back some of that power. The census truly is powerful. And when you think about the strain that's been being put on our healthcare systems and our emergency personnel, what a better way to support them than to fill out your census, because there's going to be a lot of important decisions that are going to be made in the near future regarding supporting our communities with this latest pandemic. There's going to be a lot of federal funding that comes into our communities. Let's make sure those decisions are made with the most complete and accurate data, that the funding that comes in represents the most complete and accurate data for our community. So again, I just want to thank you all, and the census is powerful. Let's fill it out.
Awesome, thank you. And Caroline?
Wow, what a fantastic conversation, everybody. Thank you so much, Lisa, for moderating, and all of our panelists for sharing that really important information about the 2020 census. On behalf of the Edward M. Kennedy Institute and our Columbia Point Joint Census Initiative partners, I want to thank everyone who's joined and listening to this program. A recording of it will be available online shortly. If I have to say it again, I will, but please remember to fill out your census. It literally only takes about 5 minutes. It's fantastically easy. For links to other past programs that you might enjoy and other online learning resources to help you to be more civically engaged and practice being democratically strong, please visit the Kennedy Institute's website at emkinstitute.org. Thanks again and have a great afternoon.